She had a system. This was the thing Lady Penelope Hartwell needed you to understand before anything else. The system was not an affectation or a quirk, or the charming organizational tendency of a woman who liked things neat. The system was the reason 17 couples were happily married, 4 of them improbably so, and the reason that Penelope's name was whispered in drawing rooms the way people whispered the names of excellent surgeons, with the specific reverence of someone who had been in a desperate situation and had found the right person. The system involved a filing method, a color-coded assessment ledger, a series of interviews she had refined over 4 years of professional matchmaking, and a fundamental philosophy she had arrived at through the hard experience of watching people nearly ruin their own happiness by insisting on what they thought they wanted. People do not know what they need. My job is to find it before they do. She was very good at her job. She was not. She had decided at approximately the age of 22, going to be good at anything personal. The personal register was the register in which she had the least confidence, and the most data suggesting confidence was unwarranted. She had tried personal twice and had found it costly in the specific way of things that you were not temperamentally suited for. And she had redirected her considerable energy toward the professional where she was suited with extraordinary precision, and she had been doing this for 4 years with excellent results. The results did not include any outcome involving Duke Arthur Pemberton, which was correct because Arthur Pemberton was her employer, and her employer was a category. And categories were how the system worked, and the system was what kept everything organized. She had a section in the color-coded assessment ledger labeled Do Not Assess. It was a very short list. Arthur Pemberton was not on it, because he did not need to be on it, because she was a professional. And professionals did not require warning labels about their employers. She told herself this with great regularity. But before we go to the 40-page list, before we sit in the drawing room where Arthur Pemberton handed a professional matchmaker the most administratively ambitious, romantic document ever produced in England, I need to ask you something. If you spent 4 years finding the right person for everyone except yourself, and the reason you hadn't found yourself, the right person, was sitting across a desk from you with a ledger and a very long list of requirements, would you know it? Or would you be too busy rolling your eyes at the requirements to notice? Drop your answer in the comments. Because Penelope did not notice for quite some time. Subscribe and hit the bell. And tell me where you are watching from tonight, your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room. Now, let's begin. The Dowager Duchess of Pemberton was 81 years old and had, in those 81 years, developed the specific quality of a woman who had run out of patience for things moving at the pace other people considered appropriate. She had also developed the specific quality of a woman who knew exactly what levers to pull to produce the outcomes she required, which was the quality of a person who had been paying attention for 81 years. The lever she pulled in April was the Thornfield estate. Thornfield was Arthur's favourite property, with grounds that Arthur had managed himself since the age of 22, and that he was, in the specific way of a man with a narrow range of genuine attachments, genuinely attached to. He had restored the tenant cottages. He had redesigned the drainage. He had a working relationship with the land that was the warmest relationship in his life, which his grandmother had noted and filed for future use. She pulled the lever in April. The terms of the late Duke's estate, she had discovered through the specific thoroughness of a woman who had been managing Pemberton affairs longer than Arthur had been alive, contained a provision she had not previously seen reason to invoke. The Thornfield property's occupancy was conditional on the continuation of the Pemberton line, which was the legal language for the heir must marry. By the end of the season, the Dowager said, in the tone she used for things she considered non-negotiable. Or the estate reverts. To whom? Arthur said. To me, said the dowager, and I will sell it. Arthur looked at his grandmother with the expression he reserved for situations that were outrageous and that he could not do anything about, which was a specific face she had, seen many times across many decades. I will find a matchmaker, he said. Find a good one, she said. You are a difficult case. Penelope received the inquiry on a Tuesday and had researched the case by Wednesday, because research was the first thing, and she did not take a case without the research being done first. The research on the Duke of Pemberton took most of Wednesday. The information available was 32 years old, dukedom in excellent financial condition, 3 primary properties, including the Shropshire estate, which appeared in the motivational notes of the inquiry. Parliamentary attendance was consistent. Social attendance was selective. He went to things he was required to go to, and did not go to things he was not required to go to, which was a quality she found professionally interesting, because it spoke to a person who had some kind of internal standard rather than simply following the social current. The accounts from people who knew him were consistent. Brilliant, she had heard 3 times, which in her experience meant intimidating, and brooding, which she had heard twice, which meant not performing emotional warmth for social purposes, and impossible, which she had heard once, from a woman who had been seated next to him at a dinner party, which she weighted accordingly. She had taken the meeting on Thursday. He had handed her the document on Thursday. She had received it with the professional composure of a woman who had received many documents and had not dropped a single one. And she had looked at the cover page, which was a cover page, and she had understood that what she was holding was not a list but a manifesto. This is 40 pages, she said. 42, he said. The appendix is on page 41. She looked at him. He was. She applied the professional assessment, which was the assessment that went into the do not assess column and stayed there. He was exactly what the research had suggested. The brooding was not a performance. He was sitting across from her in his own drawing room with the quality of a man who was doing a thing he had decided needed doing, and was going to do it with the same thoroughness he brought to estate drainage. He was also, incidentally, not on her personal assessment ledger. Walk me through the primary requirements, she said. The document is organized by tier, he said. Tier 1 is non-negotiable. Tier 2 is strongly preferred. Tier 3 is negotiable with discussion. The appendix covers the hound situation. The hound situation, she said. I have 7 hunting dogs, he said. The Duchess will need to be comfortable with 7 hunting dogs. She wrote this down. Any other animals I should be aware of? The parrot, he said. She looked up. His name is Chancellor, he said. He has opinions. She wrote parrot, Chancellor, opinions, in her notes, and she did not, through a discipline that she would later feel was worthy of recognition. Look at him with the expression she was having. She went through the 42 pages. The requirements were extensive, and some of them were reasonable. The 3 languages, because he had parliamentary obligations that involved European correspondence. The appreciation for country life, which was genuine given the Thornfield attachment. The posture requirement, which she privately thought was excessive, but which she had encountered before, and which narrowed the field in manageable ways. The weather complaint prohibition was the one she addressed directly. The weather complaint provision, she said. Yes, he said. You understand that weather is a topic of conversation that approximately 90% of the English population uses as social lubrication. Yes, he said. You want me to find a duchess who does not complain about weather. I want a duchess who can find other topics, he said. Weather is not interesting. There are more interesting things. She looked at him. He looked back. Have you considered, she said, that the woman you are describing may not exist? She exists, he said. You are a professional. Find her. She looked at the 42 pages. She looked at him. She took his money. The vetting took 3 weeks. She worked through it with the systematic thoroughness that was the signature of her professional practice. The interviews, the references, the specific assessments she had developed over 4 years of watching matches succeed and fail. She was looking for the 42 pages, which was the stated requirement, and she was also looking for something that was not in the 42 pages, which was her professional instinct about what Arthur Pemberton actually needed, as opposed to what he had specified he required. These were, in her experience, frequently different things. She narrowed the field to 7. Lady Beatrice Ashwood, Lady Gwendolen Marsh, Lady Catherine Price, Lady Cecilia Fenn, Lady Margaret Cole, Lady Victoria Strand, Lady Dorothea Lee. She reviewed the 7 files with the satisfaction of someone who has executed a difficult task to a high standard. Each of the 7 met Tier 1 requirements. The distribution across Tier 2 preferences was adequate. The appendix had been the most challenging, but 3 of the 7 had demonstrable comfort with large dogs, and Chancellor had been left deliberately unspecified in the inquiries, which was a professional judgment call she stood by. She wrote to Arthur with the results and a proposal for a week-long house party at the Pemberton estate, which was the assessment mechanism she used for multiple candidates and which had, in 3 previous cases, produced successful outcomes. He wrote back, "Proceed. This sounds like a military operation." She wrote back, "It is. Please inform the hounds." The house party began on a Monday. She had organised it with the precision she brought to all her operations. The schedule, the activities, the specific structure of events that would allow Arthur to engage with each candidate in contexts that revealed character without the candidates knowing they were being assessed in those specific contexts. She had set it up with the confidence of a woman who had done this before and knew it worked. By Tuesday evening, she was beginning to revise her confidence. Lady Beatrice was everything the file said she was. The pedigree was impeccable. The languages were real. The posture was correct. She was also, in the specific context of direct conversation with Arthur, so overcome by the circumstance of being evaluated by a duke, that she had retreated into a communication mechanism that Penelope had not anticipated, and that was not covered by the 42 pages. The hand puppet was named Mr. Buttons. Had apparently more to say to the Duke than Lady Beatrice did. Arthur had looked at Penelope across the drawing room with the expression of a man who needed something, and she had looked back at him with the expression of a professional who was managing the situation, and then Mr. Buttons had addressed Arthur directly about his opinion on the Corn Laws. And Arthur had looked at Mr. Buttons and said, with the specific politeness of a man who had decided to meet the situation where it was, "I think the 1815 Act was a significant error." She had gone to the corridor and laughed, until she was holding the wall. Lady Gwendolen was a genuine intellectual, which was something Penelope had appreciated in the assessment, and which had seemed like an excellent match for a man who had shown in his parliamentary record and his estate management a quality of rigorous thinking. Lady Gwendolen was also a classicist of the specific devoted kind, who found Latin pronunciation a matter of significant moral importance, and who had, by the 3rd hour of Tuesday afternoon, identified 17 instances of incorrect stress placement in Arthur's conversational Latin, and was addressing each of them with methodical patience. Arthur had found Penelope at 4 o'clock with the expression of a man in genuine distress. "She is correcting me," he said. "She has excellent Latin," Penelope said. "I know she has excellent Latin," he said. "She has been explaining this to me since 2 o'clock. The 42 pages specified appreciation for intellectual rigor," she said. I did not specify, he said, that the intellectual rigor be applied to me. She looked at him. That, she said, may be an oversight in the document. He made a sound. She went back to her clipboard. Wednesday was Lady Catherine, who was athletic in the way of someone who brought genuine competitive investment to all physical activities, and who had proposed a game of lawn bowls with the sociable ease of a woman who had played lawn bowls many times with many people. Penelope had noted the athleticism in the file with the specific assessment that it was a Tier 2 positive, given Arthur's stated appreciation for country pursuits. She had not specifically anticipated the manner in which Lady Catherine pursued country pursuits. She had been watching from the terrace when it happened. The specific moment in which Lady Catherine's enthusiastic approach to the game, combined with a slight incline in the lawn that the groundskeeper had flagged as needing attention, and that no one had attended to before the party had produced a chain of events ending with Arthur face down in the ornamental trench that bordered the south lawn. The trench was muddy. Penelope had been down the terrace steps before she had consciously decided to move, and she had been at Arthur's side with her handkerchief before Lady Catherine had finished her apology, which was genuine and elaborate and continued for some time. Penelope had been wiping mud off Arthur's face, and he had been looking at her with the expression of a man who had been in a trench against his will, and was finding the current moment the first tolerable one since before the trench, and she had been laughing at him while she cleaned the mud because it was objectively funny, and she was not going to pretend otherwise. You could not, she said, have fallen in any of the other 8 directions. Thank you, Penelope, he said. That is very helpful. The trench specifically, she said. Yes, I noticed, he said. The ornamental trench, she said. Will you? He said. Be done at some point. She handed him back his dignity, along with the cleaned-up handkerchief, and stood and helped him up and went back to her clipboard and noted, Lady Catherine, excellent athletic credentials, potentially too excellent. Thursday was Lady Cecilia, who was, in terms of the 42 pages, among the strongest candidates. The appearance, the posture, the 3 languages, a family with impeccable connections, and a manner that was warm and engaging and would have been thoroughly appropriate if it were not for the laugh. She had heard about laughs that were unusual. She had encountered, in 4 years of professional matchmaking, 2 cases that required management around laughter-related social situations. She had developed, from those cases, a professional view that laughter was underassessed as a compatibility factor. She had not, in the case of Lady Cecilia, asked the right questions. The laugh arrived at dinner when Arthur made an observation about the Chancellor Parrot's parliamentary opinions that was, she noted, genuinely funny in the dry, specific way of his humour when it appeared. Lady Cecilia laughed. The 7 hunting dogs, who had been settled in the far corner of the room in what Arthur referred to as their polite guest configuration, responded with the specific interest of 7 large animals who had heard something they found compelling. The chaos was brief and comprehensive. Penelope spent the clean-up process with the expression of a professional who was not going to break composure at the dinner table and who was going to have a very thorough conversation with herself about assessment methodology later in the evening. Later in the evening, in the library, Arthur poured the brandy. She had established the library review on the first evening as a professional debrief. Her and Arthur, the ledger, the day's observations, the professional assessment of progress. It had seemed, on Monday evening, like the appropriate mechanism for the operation. By Thursday evening, it was the thing she was looking forward to from approximately noon. The seagull, Arthur said. She has an unusual laugh, Penelope said. Penelope, he said. The dogs. The dogs were enthusiastic, she said. It's correctable. Is it, he said. Probably, she said. He looked at her over the brandy glass. with the expression he had developed across the week, which was the expression of a man who was finding the evenings in the library the most tolerable part of a situation he had agreed to and was not entirely reconciled to. "Can you do it?" he said. The laugh. She looked at him. "I am a professional," she said. "Penelope," he said. "Can you do it?" She did the laugh. He put his face in his hands and shook. And she was laughing too. The real laugh, not the seagull version. And the library had the specific quality of a room that was being used for something it was very suited to, which was two people laughing late at night over something that was only funny if you had been there. She thought about this later, lying in her room. She thought about it, and then she made a note in the professional column of her personal ledger, which was the internal one, which was the one she used to track things she needed to be aware of. And the note said, "Maintain professional register." It was underlined. She went to sleep. Friday was Lady Margaret, who had reorganized the Duke's financial ledger by 9 in the morning. Saturday was Lady Victoria, who had fainted into the soup. The soup had been pheasant. Arthur had looked at Penelope across the ruined dinner, with the expression that had become their shared shorthand for the week. And she had looked back with the expression that said, "I know." And she had written a note that said, "Lady Victoria requires assessment of dramatic tendency in non-performance contexts." Sunday was Lady Dorothea. Lady Dorothea was, on paper, the strongest candidate of the 7. Every Tier 1 requirement met. Tier 2 preferences extensively fulfilled. No unusual laughs, no hand puppets, no reorganization impulses, no athletic overenthusiasm, no soup incidents. Lady Dorothea was, by every metric in the 42 pages, appropriate. She was also in the specific lived experience of attempting conversation with her. A woman whose primary verbal output was agreement delivered at measured intervals, and whose follow-up questions had the quality of questions that were being produced, because questions were what one produced rather than because she was interested in the answer. Arthur, who had been looking at Penelope across rooms all week with the specific shorthand of a man who had found a fluent translation partner for the language of the ridiculous situation he was in, looked at Lady Dorothea and looked at his tea and looked at the ceiling and looked back at Lady Dorothea. And then his head was going down with the gradual inevitability of a man who has not slept adequately across a week of unusual dinners and who has encountered, in Lady Dorothea, the specific frequency of conversation that produced in him the response of unconsciousness. His face hit the teacup. It was not an impact that drew blood. It was the impact of a man whose face had arrived at a china cup with the momentum of a controlled descent rather than a fall. Lady Dorothea said, "Oh." Penelope was across the room. She lifted Arthur's face out of the tea with the specific, gentle firmness of someone who had been managing situations all week and was not going to stop now. And she dried his face with her handkerchief, and Arthur opened his eyes and looked at her, and she looked back at him, and neither of them said anything for a moment. "Lady Dorothea is charming," he said finally. "Yes," she said. "She is very agreeable," he said. "Very," she said. "I fell asleep," he said. "You did," she said. He looked at her. She looked at him. She had the handkerchief in her hand, and his face was 2 feet from hers, and his expression was the expression of a man who has spent a week finding one thing tolerable in an intolerable situation, and is looking at the one thing. She stood up. "The ball is tomorrow," she said. "You'll need to make your choice." She went back to her clipboard. The ball. She had organized it with the same precision she organized everything, and the 7 ladies were arranged in the ballroom with the specific expectation of women who had been through a week of assessment and had arrived at the final night with the particular charged quality of people waiting for a verdict. Penelope stood beside Arthur with the clipboard. The clipboard was, she had decided, the correct position. The clipboard was the professional register. The clipboard was the document that contained the assessment, and the assessment was the job, and the job was what she was. She had organized the assessment column carefully over the week. She had notes on all 7. She had a provisional recommendation, which was Lady Beatrice. The puppet situation was manageable, the pedigree was genuinely impeccable, and there was something in the Lady Beatrice file that suggested. The shyness was a circumstantial artifact that would resolve with time and comfort, which was a professional judgment she had some confidence in. She had a provisional recommendation, and she had her clipboard, and she had her professional register, and she was going to get through this evening. Arthur stepped forward. "Ladies," he said. The room had the quality of rooms that were holding their breath. "You are all magnificent," he said. She heard the but coming. She heard it coming, and she had approximately 2 seconds to process it, and she was looking at her clipboard, because looking at the clipboard was the professional register, and she was a professional. "But after a thorough examination of the candidates," he said, "I have realized that the woman I require is not among the 7. The room gasped. She turned to him. "Arthur," she said, in the low, urgent voice of a professional managing a crisis. "What are you doing?" "I'm making a decision," he said. "Choose number 4, she said. "The seagull is rich." He turned to her. She looked at him. She had been looking at him for a week, and she had been noting the things she was not assessing. And she had been maintaining the professional register with the specific discipline of a woman who understood that the professional register was the thing that kept the system working, and the system was the thing that kept everything organized, and everything being organized was how she had managed to be good at something after the personal register had proved costly. He took the clipboard out of her hands. He placed it on the table beside him. He went to one knee. The room was very quiet. "Penelope," he said. She was looking at the space where the clipboard had been. She was looking at the man on one knee in his ballroom in front of 7 ladies and approximately 47 additional guests who had come for the announcement. She was looking at Arthur Pemberton, who was brooding and impossible, and had a 42-page list of requirements, and a parrot named Chancellor with opinions, who had been face down in a trench and face down in a teacup, who had looked at her across every dinner of the week, with the specific expression of a man who had found one thing that made the situation tolerable. "You found me 7 perfect women," he said. "None of them are perfect for me," he looked at her. "I don't want a woman who checks my boxes. I want the woman who wrote the list." She opened her mouth. "You are the only one," he said, "who can handle my moods, challenge my pride, and make me laugh when I am being a miserable bore. The only one who knows about the hound situation and Chancellor and the trench and the teacup and has managed all of it with the—" He paused, looking for the word. "The specific competent exasperation that is either the most annoying or the most wonderful thing I have ever encountered, and I have spent this week determining which one it is." "And?" she said. "Overwhelmingly the second one," he said. She looked at him. She thought about the color-coded assessment ledger. She thought about the do not assess list, which did not have his name on it because she had not needed to put his name on it, because she was a professional, and professionals did not require warning, labels about their employers. She thought about 4 years of being very good at finding other people what they needed while maintaining the professional register that kept everything organized. She thought about the library at night, and the brandy, and the laugh that was only funny if you had been there. "You realize," she said, "that I am going to charge you a massive cancellation fee for the other 7. Something happened in his face. "Charge me whatever you want," he said. "Just say yes." She looked at the room, the 7 ladies, who were receiving this with varying expressions that she would need to process professionally later, and the 47 additional guests who were receiving it with the specific quality of people who had come for one kind of announcement and were getting a significantly more interesting one. She looked at him. She picked up the clipboard from the table. She looked at the 42 pages of requirements. She looked Chancellor, who had been brought to the ball by Arthur's valet and was on a perch near the east window, and who was looking at the proceedings with the specific focused attention of a parrot who had opinions. Chancellor said, obviously. She dropped the clipboard. Yes, she said. She told people afterward that the organizational system she had developed across 4 years of professional matchmaking remained entirely intact. The do not access list had simply been updated. One item added, which was now marked assessed and resolved, which was a new category she had created because she found the precision satisfying. Arthur told people that the 42 pages had been a necessary document for producing the correct outcome, which was true in the specific sense that the 42 pages had been the mechanism that brought Penelope to his drawing room in April. He maintained this was evidence of the document's value. Penelope maintained this was the most elaborate and unnecessary way to arrive at an obvious conclusion ever devised by a man with a graduate-level understanding of estate drainage. They had this argument at least twice a month. It was always the same argument. It was always good. The cancellation fees were paid. They were, as she had promised, significant. Arthur paid them without complaint, which she noted and which was its own kind of data point. Chancellor attended the wedding on his perch, positioned near the officiant, and said obviously at the moment of the vows, which was either a coincidence or an opinion. Given what she knew about Chancellor, she weighted it accordingly. A year later, the library at Pemberton House was where they spent their evenings. This had not been a planned arrangement. It had simply happened, the way things happened when people were comfortable with each other, when the room and the hour and the brandy and the conversation had the quality of something that worked, and neither of them had any interest in fixing what was working. She was on one side of the fireplace, with a ledger. He was on the other side with the parliamentary documents he brought home from the session. "The stable master," she said. He looked up. "James," she said. "He's been making eyes at the second housemaid since October." "Is this a professional assessment?" he said, "or a personal observation?" "It's an obvious situation," she said. "Chancellor noticed it in November." "Chancellor notices everything," he said. "The question is whether James is going to do anything about it, or whether someone needs to organize the situation." Arthur looked at her over the parliamentary papers. "You want to organize the stable master's love life." "I want to create the conditions in which the stable master's love life organizes itself naturally," she said. "There is a difference. You are going to plan a house party," he said. "A small one," she said. "Penelope," he said, "the last house party you organized ended with me proposing to my matchmaker. That," she said, "is what I would call a successful outcome." He looked at her. She looked at him. "One more condition," she said. "What?" "No 42-page documents." "I wasn't going to write a 42-page document for the stable master," he said. "I have seen your approach to documentation," she said. "The condition stands." He went back to the parliamentary papers. She went back to the ledger. The fire burned. Chancellor, on his perch by the window, said something that sounded like approval and then went to sleep. She made a note in the new ledger. James, initial assessment. Obvious. Next steps, conditions for natural resolution. Timeline, before he loses his nerve. She looked at Arthur across the fireplace. He had the specific quality of a man who was doing his work with the background comfort of a person who was not alone in a room and was not performing not being alone, but simply was not alone, which was the quality she had spent 4 years helping other people find and had not, until a particular April Thursday, understood she was looking for herself. She looked at the ledger. She looked at her husband. She threw the clipboard when he got too bossy, which was regularly, which was always, which was the condition of being married to a man who had 42 pages of opinions about the correct way to do things. She had 43. They were on balance doing very well. Tell me in the comments which moment was your favourite. Was it Mr. Buttons and the Corn Laws, the trench, the seagull and the dogs, the teacup, or Chancellor saying obviously at the wedding? Drop it below. I want to know which one made you laugh. And tell me where you're watching from. Your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room tonight. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the next story opens with a woman who inherits her late husband's business and discovers that the man she's been corresponding with for a year, the one she considers her closest confidant, is the competitor she's been told to destroy. I'll see you there.